The transport ship groaned, a sound like a dying beast, as it descended through the amber clouds of Kilarion Prime. The vibration worked its way up through the deck plating into the bones of Kale Bren, who sat alone in the cargo hold. His wrists were bound by magnetic cuffs that hummed with a soft, relentless blue light, a gentle technology containing an ungentle reality. He had been Sergeant Kale Bren once. 3 commendations for valor during the frontier wars, his name etched onto memorials and, ironically, given to a ridge of blood-soaked rock. Now he was cargo, a war debt, paid in flesh and time, shipped across the galaxy like a piece of furniture no one wanted but the treaty demanded. The treaty between the Terran Alliance and the Velin Dominion was 18 months old, but its terms were acid-etched into Kale's memory. For every 100 Velin soldiers killed, 1 human would serve the Dominion for 10 years. His unit at Bren's Ridge, the ridge named for him in the after-action reports, had killed 712 enemies in a single, endless night. The accountants in the treaty office had done their grim arithmetic, their fingers dancing across tablets, and Kale's number had come up. 7.12 humans. He was the .12. He had not protested when they came. What was the point? The war was over. His friends were fertilizer on half-remembered moons. Sarah, his wife, had left 3 years before the armistice, her love worn thin by his long absences and the hollow, haunted look in his eyes that even peace couldn't fill. His parents had passed while he was fighting on some barren rock whose name had already slipped from his memory. Earth held nothing for him but ghosts, the phantom ache of old wounds, and the echo of gunfire that served as the soundtrack to his dreams. So at 0600, he had opened his door to the military police, packed a single bag with 3 changes of clothes and a faded photograph of his parents, and walked out of his life without a backward glance. Now, at 37, he was bound for an alien world to serve masters he had spent his adult life trying to kill. The universe, he thought, doesn't just have a sense of humor. It's a sadist. Through the small, grimy viewport, Kilarion Prime resolved into focus. Not a planet of greenery and blue water, but a world of majestic, brutal geography. And there, rising from the throat of a colossal crimson canyon, was Athorn, the capital of the Velin Dominion. It was a city built not across the land, but into the sky. Towers of polished black stone and gleaming golden metal rose from the canyon walls like crystalline growths, connected by a delicate lacework of bridges that shone like spider silk in the light of the setting twin suns. It was architecture for beings who owned the air, with balconies, platforms, and open arches at every dizzying level. At its heart, a cluster of needle-like spires pierced the heavens, the citadel, the palace of the Empress. It looked less like a building and more like a challenge to the cosmos. The ship shuddered as it found its berth. The clang of boots on metal echoed, and the cargo bay doors groaned open, flooding the hold with thick, amber light and air that tasted strange, thin, metallic, with an undercurrent of something floral and sorrowful. 3 Velin guards entered. They were tall, each nearing 7 feet, their forms sleek and powerful. Their skin held the pallor of moonlight, and their eyes glowed with a faint, innate amber radiance. Their faces were hauntingly familiar yet alien. High cheekbones, sharp jaws, an elegance that spoke of ancient lineage. And their wings, currently folded tightly against their backs in sleek, dark sheaths, marked the fundamental difference. These were not decorations, they were identity. "Rise, human," the lead guard commanded, his voice accented, each word spoken as if it were a stone dropped into water. "Your service begins." Kale stood, the movement automatic. He had learned during the war that the Velin valued composure above almost all else. Screams, protests, tears, they were the language of prey. Silence and steadiness were the only currencies that purchased a sliver of respect. The guards led him down the ramp. The gravity was lighter, about 90% of Earth's, making his steps feel treacherously buoyant. He filed the sensation away, a soldier's habit. Catalogue the environment. Note every advantage, every threat. It's what keeps you breathing. They marched him through the streets of Athorn. The Velin stopped to stare. Conversations wilted into whispers. They watched from behind elegant feathered fans, from balconies, with luminous, unreadable eyes. They were beautiful and utterly foreign. Children, their wings still small, fluffy downs, pointed and chattered in a language like wind chimes and birdsong. "Human," a young voice called from above. "Is it true you can't fly?" Kale looked up at the small face peering over a balcony rail. He didn't answer. "The truth? Yes, we are forever grounded, prisoners of gravity and our own imperfect bodies," seemed too profound a confession for a child. The procession wound through markets smelling of strange spices and stranger fruits, past fountains where water defied logic and flowed upward, along avenues lined with statues of winged warriors and scholars. Everywhere was evidence of a civilization that had mastered the stars when humanity was discovering fire. The weight of their history was a palpable pressure. The citadel of spires was overwhelming up close. Its gates, 30 feet tall and made of a nameless, smoky metal, opened without a sound. Inside was a symphony of light and shadow. Crystalline windows fractured sunlight into rainbows that danced across polished floors. Servants moved with silent efficiency, their robes whispering against stone. Tapestries depicting millennia of Velin history adorned the walls. Conquests, discoveries, a saga written in thread. Finally, they reached the heart of the Dominion, the Grand Observance Hall. The dome ceiling was a masterpiece, painted with the precise night sky of Kilarion Prime. Constellations, some familiar from Terran star charts, others utterly alien, glittered with embedded luminescence. And on a throne carved from a single, massive piece of obsidian that seemed to drink the light around it, sat Empress Allrain. She was ancient by Velin reckoning, yet time had sculpted rather than eroded her. Her hair was a river of silver white, intricately braided and woven with jewels that caught the light like captive stars. Her wings, though folded, were vast, their membranes stretched over a framework of bone as substantial as Kale's forearm. Her robes were deep violet and gold, and her eyes, twin pools of liquid amber, held him with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. Beside the throne stood a younger woman, and Kale's breath hitched. She was beauty of the most dangerous kind. Her hair was the black of the void between stars, falling in a cascade that seemed to hold its own motion. Her skin held a pale, luminescent quality with a faint violet undertone. Her eyes glowed not amber, but a fierce, electric blue-violet. She wore not robes, but armor, purple plates edged in silver, inlaid with pulsing blue crystals that beat like a slow, steady heart. Her wings were darker than any he'd seen, near black, their membranes seeming to absorb light. She looked at him as one might examine a stain on the floor. "This is the war debt." Her voice was cold, the contempt so thick it seemed to chill the air. "This is what they send us. A broken, ground walker, past his prime, with more scars than useful skills." She shifted her gaze to the Empress, her wingtips giving a slight, agitated tremble. "I expected something more formidable." The Empress raised a hand, just a slight lift of her fingers. The younger woman fell silent, though her jaw clenched. "Thandris," the Empress said, her voice soft yet carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "You will contain your judgment." The young woman, Thandris, inclined her head stiffly, but her burning eyes never left Kale. The Empress turned her gaze back to him. "Human, state your former station." Kale straightened his shoulders, the old drill instructor posture returning. "Kale Bren, former sergeant, Terran Alliance Marine Corps, 3rd Battalion, 7th Regiment." A ripple, subtle but there, passed through the Empress's serene face. "Bren," she repeated, tasting the syllable. "As in, Bren's Ridge." The hall became preternaturally quiet. "Yes, Your Majesty." The silence deepened, becoming a substance you could drown in. Thandris was staring at him now, the hatred in her eyes momentarily eclipsed by something else. Shock, recognition, a dawning, terrible understanding. "You led the defense," the Empress said, her voice thoughtful. "You held a position that should have fallen in minutes. For 16 hours. You turned the tide. You killed 217 of my warriors in a single night." Kale met her gaze, his own empty of pride. "I followed my orders. I protected my people." The Empress studied him for a long, unnerving moment. Then, unexpectedly, a small, knowing smile touched her lips. "I was there," she said quietly. "At Bren's Ridge. I led the final assault." Kale's blood turned to ice. Memories, fragmented and sharp, assaulted him. The deafening chaos, the stench of plasma and blood, the screams of his friends, the relentless pressure. And he remembered her, a Velin commander, a whirlwind of fury and skill, cutting through their lines like a scythe. A lucky shot from a manned plasma cannon had sent her crashing to the churned mud, her wings broken, her armor smoking. "I shot you down," he whispered, the words leaving him before he could stop them. "You did," the Empress affirmed, her smile not wavering. "And when your soldiers moved to execute me as I lay helpless, you stopped them. You gave me water from your own canteen. You used your field kit to bind my wounds. You stood guard over me until dawn, when our counterattack forced your retreat." She paused, letting the words resonate. You showed mercy to an enemy who had shown you none. You saved my life. A wave of audible shock swept through the court. Thandris's wings flared open halfway, an involuntary betrayal of her utter astonishment. I didn't know who you were, Kale said, his voice rough. I just knew you were hurt. Killing a defensible enemy, it wasn't in me. Not then. The Empress rose from her throne. Her wings unfurled slightly for balance, revealing patterns of iridescent color that swam across the membranes. She descended the steps, each movement graceful and deliberate, until she stood before him. She reached out, her long fingers touching the magnetic cuffs at his wrists. They emitted a soft click hiss and fell to the floor with a clatter that echoed like a gunshot in the silent hall. From this day, she announced, her voice ringing with absolute authority, Kale Bren is no longer a war debt. He is a guest of the Dominion, under my personal protection and grace. To harm him is to harm me. To dishonor him is to dishonor this throne. The hall erupted in a cacophony of murmurs. Nobles exchanged furious or bewildered glances. Thandris looked as if she had been physically struck. Mother, she hissed, the word strained. You cannot be serious. He is human, a killer. My own brother, Corvin, he died at that ridge. His wife mourns him still, his child will never know him. And you would honor the butcher who caused it. The Empress turned, placing a gentle hand on her daughter's armored shoulder. The contrast between maternal touch and martial shell was stark. I have never been more serious. You, Thandris, will be his guide and his guardian here. You will show him the respect owed to one who saved your mother's life. Respect. You ask me to revere him. Thandris's voice trembled with barely contained fury. I do not ask, the Empress said, her voice softening into something even more unyielding. As your Empress, I command it. You will revere him. For a heartbeat, Kale was certain Thandris would defy the order. Her wings were fully extended now, a classic threat display, the black membranes quivering. The crystals on her armor pulsed with frantic, angry light. Her hands were clenched so tightly the armored gloves creaked. Then, with a visible, painful effort, she forced her wings to fold. She lowered her head, not in submission, but in bitter acknowledgement. As you command, she grated out, each word tasting of ash. The Empress nodded, satisfied. Good. She turned her amber eyes back to Kale. You will have quarters in the palace. My daughter will see to your needs. Welcome to Kilarion Prime, Sergeant Bren. I hope you find more here than you have lost. As guards, now more like escorts, led him away. Kale felt the heat of Thandris's gaze boring into his back. He didn't turn. Some enemies, he knew, you couldn't face head-on. Some battles were fought in the quiet, in the space between words. Blank, underscore, blank. The quarters assigned to him were a cavern of luxury. The bed could have slept a squad. A window wall presented a breathtaking, vertigo-inducing view of the city below, where lights were beginning to sparkle like earthbound stars. There was a bathing pool, not a tub, filled with steaming, fragrant water. A closet held fine garments in his size. Kale ignored it all. He sat on the floor, back against the wall, and stared at his now free hands. He remembered, not an empress, but a wounded soldier in the mud. The hatred in the eyes of his own men, who wanted vengeance. The eerie calm in her amber eyes. Not fear, just the profound exhaustion of one who has given everything. He'd seen that look in the mirror. He'd given her water, not as an act of nobility, but as a reflex. A tiny, stubborn assertion that even in hell, they could still be people. He had never expected consequences. He had never expected to see her again. A knock, immediate and imperious, was followed by the door sliding open before he could answer. Thandris stood there, her helmet gone, her sharp features fully visible. The blue-violet light of her eyes was even more intense up close, glowing with a cold fire. "Let there be no misunderstanding between us," she began, venom in every syllable. "My mother's command is law. I will obey it. I will ensure you are not harmed. I will show you the forms of respect. But I do not feel reverence. I feel nothing for you but the loathing you have earned. You are a killer of my kin. A ground walker. A reminder of everything I have lost. You are a burden I must bear, nothing more." Kale simply nodded. Understood. She blinked, thrown off balance by his lack of reaction. "That is all you have to say. What would you like me to say?" Kale asked, his voice weary. "That I'm sorry for surviving. That I regret defending the people I was sworn to protect." He shook his head slowly. "I've done terrible things in war. Things that haunt me. But I never took a life I didn't believe was necessary to save another. I'm not a monster, princess. I'm just a soldier. No better, no worse, than any who fought on your side." "Necessary," she spat. "You call my brother's death necessary?" He was 23. He had just been bonded. His mate carries his child, who will now only know him from stories. "I call it war," Kale said, the fatigue in his voice giving it a hollow weight. "Your people fired the first shots in the Helios sector. We defended it. People. Good people. Young people. People with futures. Died on both sides. If you need a demon to hate to make your grief manageable, I can't stop you. But I won't play the part." For a long moment, she was silent. Her wings shifted restlessly. Then, abruptly, she turned and walked to the window, her back to him, her silhouette framed by the sprawling city. "His name was Corvin," she said, her voice suddenly quieter, the anger momentarily banked, revealing the raw grief beneath. "He loved poetry. And gardening. He built a hidden garden here in the palace, full of starlight blooms. He said things that grow are more important than things that destroy." She turned, her expression not softened, but complexified. He would have hated everything about that ridge. But he went. Because it was his duty. "And you killed him." "I am sorry," Kale said, and he meant it. The words felt inadequate, a pebble thrown into a canyon of sorrow. "For your loss. For his wife's loss. For the child's loss. My regret doesn't fill the hole he left. Nothing does. The war ends, but the absence is permanent." Something flickered in her eyes. Not forgiveness, but a faint, reluctant recognition of a shared language of loss. The wall of pure hatred had developed a hairline crack. "Tomorrow," she said, her tone all business again, but slightly less sharp, "you begin. You will learn our ways. You will attend functions. You will be the living symbol of this peace. Try not to be clumsy." "I'll do my best," Kale replied dryly. She gave him one last, inscrutable look, then left. The door shut, leaving him in the alien silence. He looked out at the unfamiliar constellations. Somewhere in that direction, impossibly far away, was Earth. A home that was no longer home. He wondered if, in 10 years, anyone there would remember Kale Bren. He wondered if he would even be the same man to remember himself. Blank, _, blank. The following days were a relentless tutorial in another world's soul. Kale learned the subtle choreography of bows, the angle of the head for a peer, the depth of the incline for a superior, the specific wing tuck that accompanied a greeting to royalty. He learned dining etiquette involving an array of utensils that seemed designed as philosophical puzzles. He learned to navigate the complex social currents of the court, where a slight emphasis on the wrong syllable could be an insult. Thandris was his relentless, grudging tutor. She corrected him with icy precision, steered him away from diplomatic pitfalls, and watched him with the alertness of a hawk watching a mouse, but a mouse that was, inexplicably, under her protection. The first test of that protection came on his 5th night. Kale's combat-honed senses pulled him from sleep a second before his door slid open silently. He was off the bed, rolling to the floor, his hand closing on the only weapon-like object in the room, an ornamental long knife from the wall. It was meant for display, but he'd checked its edge on the first day. It would cut. The assassin was a blur of dark cloth and lethal intent, moving with Velin speed. Kale parried the first strike, the impact numbing his arm. He didn't try to match speed. He used the environment, dropping low, letting momentum carry the attacker past him, using the lighter gravity to aid his own roll. He came up inside the assassin's guard and drove the blade upward. It was not a clean kill. It was messy, desperate, and painful. The assassin cried out, a sound of shock as much as pain. Light flooded the room. Thandris stood in the doorway, armor hastily fastened, her hair disheveled, her wings flared in alarm, a drawn energy blade humming in her hand. Palace guards poured in behind her. The wounded assassin tried to flee towards the balcony. He didn't make it. The guards were upon him. In the sudden quiet, Kale stood breathing heavily, the decorative knife dripping onto the polished floor. A cut on his forehead bled into his eye. Thandris approached, her eyes scanning him, assessing. "You're injured." "I'm alive," Kale rasped, wiping blood from his brow. Often the same thing. A ghost of something. Not a smile, but an acknowledgement, passed over her face. "Lord Soren Kaval," she said, looking at the subdued attacker. A former military advisor. He opposed the treaty. He lost 2 sons in the war. She said it not as justification, but as cold fact. "He's not very good at this," Kale observed, his heart still hammering. He will be adequate at his trial, Thandris replied. And then he will be nothing. She turned to him fully. You fought. Effectively. I've had practice. People keep trying to kill me. The species varies. This time, the ghost definitely twitched at the corner of her mouth. Come, she said, her voice less sharp. The healers. Then I will find you new quarters. With better locks. As they walked the corridors, Kale noticed Thandris positioned herself differently, closer. Her body subtly angled to shield him, her wings no longer tightly folded but slightly loose, ready to snap into a protective canopy. He said nothing, but he noted it. Lord Soren's trial was swift and merciless. The Velin justice system valued efficiency. The evidence was damning. He had acted with others still unknown. The Empress's wrath was a cold, terrifying thing. Her wings cast the hull in shadow. You would violate the guest right, the oldest law of civilized beings, her voice boomed. You would spit on peace and summon back the specter of war. The penalty for treason is death. But for you, death is a mercy you forfeit. She pronounced the sentence. Exile, name stripping, and wing clipping, the permanent, surgical removal of his primary flight membranes. To a Velin, it was a living death. A reduction to a half-being, a permanent grounding. His scream of utter despair echoed long after the guards dragged him away. That night, Thandris came to his new quarters. She carried a bottle of amber liquor and 2 glasses. She wore no armor, just a simple, dark blue robe. I thought you might need this, she said, holding up the bottle. Celebrating? Kale asked. Surviving, she corrected. It is often worth a drink. They sat on his balcony. The liquor was smooth and complex, like fire and honey in distant memories. I owe you an apology, Thandris said after a long silence, not looking at him. Kale waited. I treated you as a symbol. A thing. Not a man. She finally met his gaze. When my mother gave her command, I thought it was the sentimentality of age. How could one revere a human? A ground walker. A killer. She swirled her drink. But I have watched you. You learn our ways not with resentment, but with quiet observation. You treat the lowliest servant with the same calm respect you show a high lord. You faced death in that room not with bravado, but with a weary competence. And you showed restraint. You disarmed, you wounded, but you did not kill Soren when you had the chance. My brother's killer would have killed him. She took a deep breath. You are not what I was taught to hate. And that confuses me. It is easier to hate a monster than a man. Kale nodded slowly. I know the feeling. It's easier to hate the faceless enemy dropping shells on you than the young soldier across the trench who's just as scared and just as far from home. They talked then, not as prisoner and keeper. Not as human and Velin, but as 2 soldiers who had seen the same terrible truth of war. Thandris spoke of the pressure of her birth, the weight of expectation, the loneliness of command. Kale spoke of Earth's green hills, now just images in his mind, of friends turned to ghosts, of the hollow victory of survival. When the smaller moon began to rise, She stood to leave. At the door, she paused. Kale, yes. Thank you. For what? For being patient with my hatred. He offered a small, genuine smile. It's hard to stay angry at someone who keeps saving your life. Her wings gave a soft rustle. I have yet to save your life. Yet, he agreed. The weeks that followed saw a subtle thaw. They trained together in the palace cell. Kale showing her the brutal, efficient close-quarters combat of the Terran Marines. Thandris teaching him the principles of three-dimensional, aerial combat. They were lessons in trust as much as technique. He had to trust her not to drop him during flight drills. She had to trust him not to break her hold when he demonstrated a disabling move. They shared meals. He told her about baseball, a game she found bafflingly primitive and fascinating. She recited old Velin poetry, the rhythms like wind over crystal. Laughter, tentative at first, began to punctuate their time together. The court watched, whispers swirling, some scandalized, some curious, a few hopeful. It was Thandris who showed him the hidden garden. It was behind an unmarked door in a forgotten corridor, a small, perfect sanctuary. Plants with blossoms that glowed with their own soft light filled the space, and a small fountain trickled peacefully. Corvin made this, she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. His sanctuary. He said this was where he remembered what we were supposed to be protecting. It's beautiful, Kale said, meaning it. He would have liked you, she murmured, sitting on a stone bench. He believed in bridges, not walls. Kale sat beside her, a careful distance between them. He sounds like he was the best of you. He was, she whispered. And then, to his surprise, a single, perfect tear traced a path down her cheek. And I have spent years drowning his memory in hatred. For you. For all humans. She turned to him, the tear glittering in the starlight from the blooms. I don't hate you anymore, Kale. I think I am beginning to see you. His heart thudded against his ribs. Thandris, your mother commanded you to revere me. I don't want any of this to be about obedience. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. My mother has commanded many things of me. This is the first command my heart is learning to follow on its own. When she leaned in and kissed him, it was not an act of passion, but of profound surrender, the laying down of a weapon long carried. Her wings, as if of their own volition, swept forward, enveloping them in a soft, dark canopy, a private universe. In that embrace, Kale felt a peace he had thought war had burned out of him forever. But peace in a palace is a fragile thing. The disruption came 3 months later. An urgent communiqué from the mining colony of Velin Prime. Separatists, hardliners who rejected the peace, had seized the orbital refineries. Thousands of Velin workers and their families were hostages. The separatist leader was General Morvith Raven, exiled for advocating total genocide of humanity. He had vowed to destroy the refineries and the hostages, rather than surrender. The council was in an uproar. Send the fleet. Burn them out. One commander shouted. And kill 3,000 of our own. The Empress countered, her voice silencing the room. She turned her gaze, heavy with implication, to Kale. All eyes followed. "What would you do, Sergeant Bren?" she asked. "If this were a Terran problem." Kale studied the holographic schematics floating in the air. The colony's layout, the refinery controls, the access tunnels. His mind, the soldier's mind, began to trace paths, identify choke points, calculate odds. "You need someone inside," he said finally. "Someone to disable the refinery destruct sequence and free the hostages before an assault begins." "Impossible," a general scoffed. "Our forces would be detected instantly." "Your forces would," Kale agreed. He looked at the Empress. "But I am not Velin. I am human." The last thing they'd expect walking through their door. The debate raged again. Madness, suicide, brilliance. The Empress watched Kale, her amber eyes seeing not the man, but the principle he represented. "You would do this?" she asked. "Risk your life for Velin hostages?" "I would risk it for any hostages," Kale said simply. "Innocence doesn't have a species." A slow nod. "Then you shall have every resource." Thandris found him packing that night. She was pale, her composure shattered. "You can't," she breathed, gripping his arms. "This is not your fight. You are free." "It became my fight the moment they took those families," Kale said gently, covering her hands with his. "Your mother gave me back my life. This is me, using it for something that matters. I cannot lose you," she whispered, a desperate confession. "Not now. Not when I've just." He pulled her close, her forehead resting against his. "I will come back," he vowed, his voice low and fierce. "I have a reason to now." She kissed him, a kiss flavored with salt tears and fierce promise. "Then swear it." "I swear. On my life. On this." He kissed her again. "Now let me go save some people so I can come home." The infiltration was a descent into a different kind of hell. Morvith was paranoid and brilliant. Kale spent days as a ghost in the maintenance tunnels, mapping patrols, bypassing sensors, nursing a burn on his side from a near miss. He found the hostages in the central dome, terrified families, children huddled with their parents, their small, downy wings quivering. He couldn't do it alone. The math was brutal. He needed help. He found it in Sari, a refinery engineer who had escaped the initial roundup. She was hiding, fierce and intelligent. "You're human," she stated, wary. "I'm here to help," Kale replied, showing empty hands. She studied him, then nodded. "Tell me what to do." Together, they built a rebellion from the shadows. Sari knew the colony's systems intimately. Kale provided the tactical framework. They recruited others, carefully, slowly. A plan took shape. Not a heroic charge, but a precise, coordinated seizure of key systems. When the signal was sent, a single, pulsed burst to the fleet, chaos erupted. The fleet hit communications and shipyards. Inside, Kale and his makeshift team struck in the engineered darkness. It was not a glorious battle. It was a brutal, close-quarters brawl in the dark, where Kale's decades of training met the desperate courage of ordinary people fighting for their homes. When the lights flickered back on, it was over. Morvith lay dead. His followers surrendered. The destruct sequence was neutralized. Kale stood in the center of the dome, swaying rolls. He saw families reuniting, children crying in relief. Sari approached, her eyes wide. "You did it." "We did," he corrected, his voice slurring. Then the adrenaline drained away, and the world tilted into blackness. Blank, blank. He woke to the sterile hum of a medical suite and the warmth of a hand in his. Thandris was there, her face etched with fear and relief. "You ridiculous, brave, impossible man," she whispered, her voice thick. "The healers said you should be dead. Promised I'd come back," he managed. She brought his hand to her lips. "Do not ever scare me like that again." When he was strong enough to stand, she brought him before the Empress again. The throne room was packed, silent. The Empress rose, her expression solemn. "Kale Bren," she intoned. "You came to us as a debt, a cipher for loss. You have become something else. You have fought for our people as one of your own. You have bled for strangers. You have reminded an old empire of the meaning of honor." She descended the steps, stopping before him. "From this day, you are no longer a guest. You are a citizen of the Dominion. A hero of Kilarion Prime." She paused, a true, warm smile touching her eyes. "And, if my daughter will have you, you will be family." The gasp that swept the hull was thunderous. Kale looked at Thandris. Her eyes were wide, shining with hope and fear. The Empress continued, her voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "There is one more truth, Kale. A secret my daughter has carried, out of fear and love." She nodded to an aide. A side door opened. A young Velin servant emerged, holding the hand of a small child. A little girl, no more than 3, with wispy, dark hair and wide, curious eyes that glowed the same brilliant blue-violet as her mother's. Her tiny, underdeveloped wings fluttered nervously. Thandris let out a soft sob, her hand flying to her mouth. "This is Nissa," the Empress said gently. "My granddaughter. Thandris's daughter. Her father died at Bren's Ridge. She has been hidden, protected from those who would use her as a political tool. But no longer." Thandris knelt, tears streaming down her face. The little girl broke from the servant and ran into her mother's arms. "Mama." Over Nissa's head, Thandris looked at Kale, her expression one of terrified vulnerability. "Her father was bonded to me for alliance. It was not a love match. He died before she was born. I hid her to keep her safe. Kale, I should have told you." Kale's world reoriented itself around this new, profound truth. He looked at the child, this innocent who was a living legacy of the very war that had broken him, and he felt no anger, no jealousy. He saw only a little girl who needed safety. He saw Thandris's heart, walking outside her body. He slowly knelt beside them, ignoring the pain in his healing body. Nissa peered at him from the safety of her mother's neck. "Hello, Nissa," he said softly. She studied him with solemn intensity. "You're warm," she stated. "Mama is cool." We're different, Kale agreed. She considered this, then stretched out a small hand, touching his stubbled cheek. I like different. Then, with the devastating simplicity of a child, she asked, will you stay? Kale looked at Thandris, at the love and fear warring in her luminous eyes. He looked at the child, at this fragile, precious thing that represented both past pain and future hope. He reached out, not to take, but to join. His hand covered Thandris's where it held Nissa. Yes, he said, his voice clear and sure in the silent hall. I will stay, if you'll have me, both of you. Thandris's answering smile was like the dawn after a long, dark night. Blank, underscore, blank. A year later, in Corvin's hidden garden, under the glow of the starlight blooms, they stood together, Kale, Thandris, and Nissa, who now called him Papa, with unshakable certainty. The twin moons hung low, bathing them in silver. Thank you, Thandris murmured, her head on his shoulder, Nissa asleep in his arms. For what? For choosing us. For teaching me that reverence isn't commanded, it's earned. And that family isn't just blood or wings, it's the people you choose to protect. Kale held them close, the grounded man embraced by the winged woman and their child. He looked out at the alien, beautiful city, no longer a prison, but a home. He thought of the ridge that bore his name, a place of death. And he thought of this garden, a place of growth. Your brother was right, he whispered into Thandris's hair. The things that grow are so much more important. In her sleep, Nissa's small wing twitched, brushing his arm. In the vast, cold cosmos, on a spire of stone reaching for the stars, a new story had taken root. It was not an ending, but a delicate, courageous beginning, forged not from victory, but from mercy, not from strength alone, but from the strength to lay down arms, a story whispered on the wind between the grounded and the winged.